And I'm really pleased to introduce our next speaker. She comes all the way from Austin, Texas. And she works at a company called Atlassian. If you don't know Atlassian, you probably know one of their main products. Whether you hate it or you love it, it's Jira. And Amber is a product manager at Atlassian, and she has a data background, so she loves data. And she has helped the product team over there become smarter about data and better at product management. Please welcome on stage Amber Van Hecke.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Pauline. So as Pauline said, my name is Amber Van Hecke, and I've had probably about 14 years of experience going on now. 4 of those years spent at Atlassian, but prior to Atlassian, many, many years of analytics stuff. So data warehousing, data science, all the way to statistics, to business intelligence, you name it, I've done it. And then I came into the Atlassian world to take on the product management position, scary enough. Had no idea what the heck I was doing, and as it turns out, having the data background actually ended up helping me quite a bit. Because what I realized is that mainly the data is extremely hard. It is very hard. Even after almost 15 years, it's hard. And anybody that stands up here and tells you that it's easy is just lying. Definitely lying. It's hard, and it's made to be hard. But there are ways to make it definitely more simple. The measurement of it, coming up with the numbers, easy. Figuring out what you should be measuring and how to actually go about calculating it, that's where things start to get a little bit harder. But it's okay, because today we are going to be here to solve that exact problem, to make it a little bit easier when you start to interact and have those same questions in your own workplace. But for all of you skeptics out there, we will start with, why the heck should you even care about this talk? So show of hands right now, how many people are at a company of about 0 to 50 people? About 50 to 100. 100 to 300? Over 300. All right. Well, fun thing is none of that matters because all of you are affected. Because data, no matter what size the company, whether it be a company of 2 or a company of 2 million, it will be impacted in some way, shape, or form. Over the last year and several years, several polls have actually been done to show that data is going to be the driving force of all companies and most likely to make the biggest impact over the next few years. So we need to get on it. It's also the thing that, guess what, all of our companies are going to be investing in, whether it be in time, money, employees, people. That's where a lot of things are going to start to get dedicated if you haven't already seen it in your current workplace. So this is the thing I get all the time from PMs where they're like, Amber, don't worry, I got this. I look at dashboards all the time. I'm good. Don't get me wrong, looking at dashboards, it's a great first step, but it is not the above all, end all thing for data. In fact, there's so much more to data than just the dashboards. I always go back to the story of Christopher Columbus for my reasoning on why you should not just look at dashboards. Christopher Columbus, we all know, he sailed the ocean blue and eventually found the Americas. But he did it all by accident. It was one big mistake, right? He was given a map, like a dashboard, and instead of looking deep into the details of that map, he made some big assumptions on how big a nautical mile should be, and he ended up going somewhere completely different than where he actually thought he was going to go, because he didn't look deeper than the data that was just right in front of him at that dashboard level. And if that wasn't good enough for you, let's take NASA. So the United States Space Agency, huge multi-million-dollar mistake where they had team number 1 come up with some calculations on how to get the Mars orbiter into space, and then they gave those calculations over to team number 2. Team number 2 took those calculations, fed them into their models, and then all of a sudden, Mars orbiter completely misses millions of dollars down the drain, and nobody knew why until they looked deeper into the details. Turns out, Team 1 used the metric system when they were doing their calculations. Team 2 thought they did imperial. Next thing you know, a lot of missed math, and bam, millions of dollars down the drain. which is why you should never look at data at face value. Instead, you should do something a little bit deeper than that and become more data-focused, right? And the way to do that and to avoid those problems like Christopher Columbus or NASA is to get deeper into the details and actually start to know a little bit more about the data flow, which is where we're going to start. So the data flow, if honestly you are going to remember anything that I say here today, let it be this. It is the most important thing you can do if you want to impact your job. If you want to make yourself invaluable to any company you are with to where they cannot afford to lose you, this is what you got to do, because nobody else is going to do it. And it's learning the data flow, and that starts at the data source. And this is going all the way to the very beginning and figuring out where the heck is my data coming from, what is being collected, and where is it going. Typically, this starts with just talking to a developer, right? They're typically the ones that end up having to do these actions of getting the data out there. It even means creating maybe a few test accounts for yourself just to see what data is collected, where is it going. And then the next step, going into the transformation piece, right? Where a lot of people don't like this spot, or this is where a lot of people start, because they think, oh, all the people that got the data to this point, it had to be accurate, right? No. Great story about Atlassian. So I started working at Atlassian and was on one of their major products, as we all know and love, Jira at the time. And we were looking up their sign-up rate. And I was going through this process of trying to learn the flows of what was happening with Jira data. Right? So I created a few fake accounts to see what would happen when I did. Where would I find me in all of our systems from what I had just done from those test accounts I created? And I went and looked for myself, and I knew I had created 3 different accounts, right? But when I went to find myself, I didn't find all 3. I had only found 1, and there was actually 2 that were missing. I was like, well, that's kind of weird. Maybe I did something wrong. So I go back, do it again. By this time, I've made tons of test accounts. And after deeper and deeper and deeper analysis, found that the calculation that was being done, that transformation that was happening, was completely wrong. So 4.5 years ago, we were reporting our numbers for sign-up rates with Jira completely under the number that we should have been, because we were just doing that transformation. And we had been doing this for years. Nobody had ever caught it until that point, and all it took was making a few quick test accounts, and it was a major game changer for the product. And then next, figuring out where that central hub is. Like I said, a lot of times this is where people start. This is where your dashboards live. This is where all your data flows. Maybe this is where your product analyst, if you have them, your BI people maybe, work in, maybe your data scientist, where you go in and you look at your dashboards, right? And the question that I always ask here is how are these people supposed to know if it's not you what they should be building, right? You're the product manager. You're the one that's supposed to be asking the right questions, the ones that's telling them the dashboards to build so that you can then answer the right things and solve the right problems, even though there is a problem, right? So if it's not you, then who is? Because if we look back at that flow and we say, all right, well, this is typically developers in this section, maybe here is where we start to see maybe some data scientists, maybe some analysts, potentially product managers, probably not. And then here we start to see more high level. This is where your product managers kind of step in, other higher level folks. But there's no single person that's actually looking at the entire thing. Nobody. And that's why I say if you are that person that does, and you become that go-to for everything data related to your product, you're indispensable. They cannot get rid of you at that point. You will be the master of your arena. So this should be the product manager space, and it should be an area that you own and are excited about. So you have all this great data. You know it. It's flowing. You know where it's coming from. You're asking great questions. You have amazing dashboards. And now you're at the point where you have all these awesome metrics, and what happens? Analysis paralysis, right? Where you have so many metrics, you have no idea what the heck you're supposed to choose from, right? So you can do one or two things. You can either just go with the ones that everybody else is using. You can create your own. Or you can just try and bucket them, right? Which is what we do at Atlassian. The easy way to do it is through a funnel. I've also seen it done through user stories. But basically, you just create massive groups, and you start to pair your metrics into those groups. This way, when you're trying to solve a particular problem or an issue, you can just say, all right, well, this issue is about collaboration, right? So what metrics do I have in my arsenal that are already there? Comments left on an issue, likes left on a page, things like that, that you can just quickly go back to and already limit the numbers that you're having to focus on versus just having this wide array of stuff that you're having to weigh through. So bucket or put your metrics into different groups. Then create that holistic view. So up until this point, we've talked about the products data, right? But truth is, there's data about our products that comes in through so many ways. I mean, we heard Sebastian a moment ago when he talked, if you were here, he said, oh, we looked at the feedback that we got from customers, qualitative feedback. All of that feedback can be used to make the data that you're getting from your product even that much more stronger. What about support tickets, tutorials, views on pages? There's 1,000,001 things that can be used, revenue, across the board that's not just specific to your product, that can actually be used to create that holistic view of what's going on. So once you have that flow of data, you have all your metric groups, you have a great idea of what's going on, you're bringing in data from outside sources, finally, you get to that point where you become that data strategist, and you start to see it in your work, right? So you start to make data more available and accessible, and maybe as a product manager, one of the things that you focus on isn't actually focused at the customer. Of course, it would be eventually, but maybe one of your projects is about making data more accessible, getting data out of the product, right? And then getting a team, driving a team that's excited about data, right? They see these projects, you put numbers on them, and it's like, hey, team, we were able to grow the product by X amount. Isn't that awesome? And people get excited, and a team rallies around it. And then finally, when you do have those successes, or even those failures, becoming that evangelist. We're very big at Atlassian about blogging, about all of these times that we win and lose within our products. Data is typically one of our biggest focuses of wins and losses here, so that other teams around Atlassian can learn and hopefully grow. So we've talked about this huge thing of what we have to do to become more data focused, right? We said, all right, we got a data flow that we got to go through. We got to learn the ins and outs of our data. We then need to figure out, after we get all these metrics, what groups they should go into. And then after we have those groups, maybe create a more holistic view, bring in other metrics in the outside world if we have that available to us. And then finally, get a team, become that strategist, get excited, get people around you excited, and evangelize data. This is a great example of where we did this, where we kind of had to start over a little bit, where you can tell where having had that data focus and drive really helped lead this project. So this is about 2 years ago. I was given an OKR. We were in this weird transition period, so I wasn't a part of this OKR when it got built. And I was told that I needed to drive our week 2 wow up by over 20% in a year. And my first response to that was, you are out of your damn mind. Like, no way. No way am I doing that. And everybody's like, why? You think that number is too high? It's like, no. Like, have nothing wrong with the percentage. The percentage is just fine. Leave that percentage alone. The problem that I'm having is with the metric, week 2 wow. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with week 2 wow, it's basically the count of users that signal anything within their second week. So why would I have a problem with that? That sounds like a pretty good measure of activation, right? Well, not really, because if you looked at the objective that they were getting at was they were trying to find value, right? See if a customer had found value, signaled that they found value and were willing to stay in the product. That's what they were driving at. And the metric that they chose to try and get that answer was week 2 wow. The reason I had a problem with week 2 wow is because I didn't feel like it was a great indicator that a user had actually found value. Why? Because many things can influence a user to come to this product, to any of our products. Me speaking right now may make all of you open up your laptops at the end of this presentation and all of a sudden go sign up, right? There's so many things on the outside world that can impact this broad of a metric. So that was one big problem that I had with it. The other problem is that it's one of those vanity metrics. I hate it, just hate it, if you can't tell, in that it can be influenced so easily. For example, say you all signed up today and then you hated it. You never wanted to come back again. But I badly wanted to hit this week 2 wow number. So I send all of you an email a week from now and I say, oh my God, you need to reset your password now. Somebody may have hacked you from another country. And then you go, oh my God, and then you quickly log in. Guess what? I have now gotten my week 2 wow numbers. It looks like I'm doing awesome as a PM, when really we have zero insight into whether or not the people that came back were actually there because they found value in the product. So a horrible metric. We're like, no, not going to use it. We're going to try something else. But what do we try? So we started thinking about the problem at hand, which was, if we have that issue of we need to know that people found value, how do we realize that they found value? And what we came up with is this idea of longevity versus frequency. The thought being that if somebody stays in the product and is active over multiple weeks, that's an awesome thing. But we don't just want to see that they've been active for multiple weeks. We want to see that they have been active for multiple days during those weeks. And that together, if you have somebody that's active for a very long time and is very frequent in their activities, then hey, they are awesome, they have found value, they are likely to come back, right? And we've won. So what metric did we have available to us that would answer that? So went back to our metric groups, looked at our little activation bubble, and as it turned out, all the things that we had in that bubble did not answer the question at all. So we had to go back to the drawing board. And we said, all right, if we're trying to get to frequency and we're trying to get to longevity, what if we create something completely new? And so we came up with our solution number 1, which was a quality user score. This is the one that we used way back then. It has now been adopted or adapted much further than it is now, and is way more scientific now than then. But basically what it did is it said, all right, we're going to look at 4 weeks in a month. We're going to give each of those weeks a weight. And then we're going to look at, out of those weeks, how many days were they active in each one. And then we're going to take those 2 different multipliers, and we're going to end up coming up with a score for each user. And that score is going to be correlated to a rating for that person. So you'd have those failures that would come in, and then they wouldn't do anything in the product. We'd never see them again. 0 score. And then you would have those people that ended up lasting, right? That stayed for a very long time in the product, that ended up with great, awesome scores. So this was a way for us to get to that quality of a user that we were looking for. The problem with it, though, was that it would take 4 weeks. Like, damn, that's a long time to wait for a metric. It's pretty lagging. So we decided we were going to adapt the Trello 2 and 7 metric, which, if you haven't heard of it, it's an awesome metric, highly recommend it, but it says within the first 7 days, a user views a Trello board on 2 separate days. You're like, man, there's some great stuff in there. Basically what they're saying is that certain actions are done within a certain time frame. So we changed it and we said, all right, within the first 14 days, because we believe 2 weeks is a good amount of time, a user performs at least 1 key action. We needed a list of key actions on 3 separate days during those 14 days. And that's how we would figure out if value was ever realized or not. But then we hit the point of, all right, now that we know where we want to go, how do we answer it? And this is where knowing that data flow helped, and knowing what was available to us helped. So we quickly looked at what our key actions were, right? So if you haven't looked at Sansky plot before, they're awesome because they help define popular user journeys. So this is an adapted one to make it kind of easier to read. They can get a little spaghetti-like. But basically what we ended up coming up with is that there were specific actions in the product that users took the moment that they started. And this was for Bitbucket at the time, if I didn't say that earlier. And we saw that people that created a repository for their code, a folder, if you will, they then added a summary page or a README to that code or to that repository. And then they then copied that folder or repository to their desktop. If they did one of those 3 actions, any of those 3 actions, all of those 3 actions, we were set if they did that. And so we wanted to promote people to continue to do this specific thing, right? We were able to collaborate with that and validate it and verify it by syncing up with other product teams. So one thing that Atlassian does that I love, that I have never seen done at another company that I have worked for, is that every single month we have our monthly metric reviews. And we have teams that come across from different areas of the org, from marketing to support to content design to product. And we all talk about our given area of metrics, right? So what we were able to learn from this is support tickets, for one, people have a hard time creating a repository. It's one of the #1 things that come in. From tutorial views from our content design team, they were able to tell us that, oh yeah, the hardest thing that we see people going to or are constantly viewing as far as our tutorials go are the how to clone a repository page. #1 tutorial across all of our Git microsite is that one. So we knew users had a problem with that. So it's another check mark for verification. We had our own event data that we used for that Sankey plot. And then finally, just customer feedback. We automatically send feedback forms within 7 days of a user signing up. And then once, if they do leave, within 30 days, we follow up. And then we always have our own HATS quarterly surveys that go out. We don't use MPS anymore, that go out. And then based on that, we were able to see that, yeah, these 4 or 5 areas are actually problematic areas in the product. But when people do get through them, we know we're going to keep them, which is great. So we were able to say, OK, we're going to focus our year, since we do our OKRs annually, we're going to focus our year, our 20%, and get that number up by doing experiments that are aimed at those 4 specific things that would all lead up to that 3 and 14 metric. And we actually ended up being extremely successful with it, more so than what we ever thought we would be. We ended up getting a 27% increase, which was absolutely awesome, just from being specific about what it was we wanted to measure and making sure that we were measuring the right thing. So after we were successful, Atlassian blog, that's what we love to do. We blogged about it. We stuck it internally, externally. It was anywhere you could possibly look, you could have found it. And we were excited by it. And we actually used it as a great teaching example in our own product conference that we do internally, just for our own product managers to learn from, because it was such a great learning exercise for us to look at our data, look at the metrics, look at what we were truly trying to measure, and coming up with something new that ended up working. But it all started at a root of this, which was knowing our data, knowing what was available to us, knowing where to find it, knowing what our metrics were and where those groups of metrics could be found, creating that holistic view by reaching out to our other comrades and saying, all right, what marketing metrics are there? What content design metrics are there? What support metrics are there? Creating that holistic view, and then finally putting together a data strategy that it worked. It actually worked. And it was awesome. So we continue to use that approach. I hope you will continue to use that approach. Because like I said, if you pull this off, you will be invaluable. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. First question is, so all of this approach seems quite technical, and it's probably very hard, otherwise we would all already be doing it. So how do you learn and how do you train yourself to be one of these product managers?
So that's probably the question that I get the most, is where do I begin? And it's not easy. I mean, if it were easy, everybody would do it. But the best way to start is, like I said, create test users in your products and then sit with the developer to figure out where all that data is funneling from. You don't have to be somebody that knows code. You don't need any of that, but just sit with somebody that does, that can show you where that data is going so that you then can easily access it. But yes, start with test accounts. It's the easiest way to learn what is happening with your data.
So you were kind of like the first one to have this approach with data in your product team. Did you manage to get the other ones on this approach as well?
Oh, yeah. I am very proud to say, like, our team is extremely, I would say what went from not being very data focused at all, it was more of like gut feel approach when we would kind of go after any type of project, which there's nothing wrong with that, but maybe not the best solution, right? But are definitely more thoughtful now. We actually recently had an offsite, this was a few weeks ago, and the amount of time we spent going over our annual plan and how we were going to measure it was extensive. It took us weeks to do it. So it was awesome to see kind of what we've come from, where a few years before, when we would do our annual planning, because our fiscal year is July, we could do it in a day, and now it takes us close to a month. And that's just because we're putting so much more thought into what we're going after and how we're going to actually figure out if we were successful or not.
Do you have product analysts at Atlassian? And if so, like, how do you split the work between everything you just said and their role?
Right, so we do have product analysts at Atlassian. I think the thing there that I try and drive home is that product analysts, they typically, they're either divided amongst multiple products sometimes, or maybe they're not sitting directly with you, and they don't have the product expertise that you have. They can't reach into your mind, right, and see the questions that you have about the product or know what it is you are thinking. I sit a lot of my time with my product analyst, Amit, who is actually in Sydney, Australia, which time zone is not easy, where we talk about kind of what my concerns are, the things that I wish we could do, the things that I know that I would like to measure, just need somebody that can help me figure out the best way to do that. And then together we work on it. But a significant portion of my time is working with product analysts, and that's mainly because the Atlassian strategy is very much data-focused right now, data-driven decisions. That's all you hear, but it's not just a word. That's something that we truly are trying to stick to.
What tools do you use to collect and organize data?
Oh my gosh, we have so many tools. So Amplitude, I'm not even saying that because they're sponsoring. We genuinely do use Amplitude. We use them for our event streams. We have Redash, which was originally created by Facebook. Obviously, all of our own in-depth tools that we built on our own. Basic databases. Oh gosh. We have so many, and yet I can barely think of any. We have a ton of tools. Tableau is one. Any type of visualization software, you name it, and I guarantee you we are using it. Qualtrics is up there for surveying. There's a ton of tools.
Well, I think that's a perfect transition to the tool talk just after you, Amber. Thank you for coming all the way to Paris.
Thank you.